Jumbo, I'm Ayuma, the story coach.
Jumbo, I'm Auma, the money coach.
Together, we bring you Her Money Story Africa,
a podcast where we are humanizing African women's money stories.
We believe every African woman knows something about money that she could teach or learn. Grab your drinks and snacks and let's talk money the African woman style.
Remember to subscribe to our podcast and share it with a friend.
Hey sis, Ayuma here. Today's money story is by Auma. She's from Nairobi City in Kenya, and she talks about childhood and money. Enjoy her story and look out for Auma's money tool and our reaction to this episode.
All right, so I was probably 14 years old or 15 years old when this story was happening. I come from a family of four, and my oldest sister at that point was probably 20, 21. And then my older brother was about 18, 19, and then me. And then my small sister was about 12 at that point. And so at that age, we were capable, like in terms of being able to run our home and manage our home. We had our chores and we could do our chores without really being looked over, and no one was really watching over what we were doing. At that point as well, my mom had passed away probably a year or so before, and my dad had this job where he used to travel quite a bit. Or rather, well, now in hindsight, I do think he was traveling, but he was oftentimes go away from home probably 3 to 4 times in a week or in a month, travel three or two times. And whenever he would leave, he would also make sure that we had enough money to take care of our groceries, anything basically we would have needed money for. If it was over and above the groceries, he would also make sure that the finances were available. And he used to do this thing that he would put it in an envelope and then leave it on top of the fridge, because he would leave very early in the morning while we were all still asleep. So we wake up, oh, dad is not around, he's left the money. And because my sister was the firstborn, and as is the case in any African household, the firstborn is basically deputy parent. And because she was deputy parent at that point, it was automatic that she was responsible for taking care of the finances and making sure that whatever was missing was bought, and basically we could survive on our own until that came home. We didn't have any house help at that point, so it was just us. In fact, I think my brother was away in campus outside of Nairobi, and so it was just me and my sisters. Every time dad left, we would be able to take care of ourselves, and that was it. But after a while, because this was a very common occurrence, after a while I realized that while dad was off away for 4 days or so, by day 2 or 3, the money is no longer enough. I can realize, like, 2 days to dad coming home, no, my sister says the money has finished. We actually can't buy supper tonight, or there's no money to buy gas, or there's no money to buy petrol, so we can't cook. One thing or the other was always happening, such that we would run out of money. And yet, when dad left, he had done the math. Like, he knows we actually have enough money to take us through. And so I started following up, and I'm like, what actually have we spent money on? And while I was doing the math, I realized there was some money that was going missing. And again, taking a deep dive, I realized, because at that age, my sister was really into going out. She would go out with friends, she would have friends over. Like every Wednesday night or Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night, like my sister was really the girl of the people. And she would use some of this money to go out. And that's how the money was actually running out, because it was not being used for what it was meant to be used for. And when I realized that, it made me a bit disappointed, because I was just like, why are we struggling? Why are we suffering? And yet essentially we should be having the amount of money that we should have everything we need because it has been taken care of. And I remember on one particular day, my small sis was crying because it was a day before that was due to come, and we hadn't eaten. The only thing available, I think, was tea, and not just drink, but black tea. Tea without milk, which is the ultimate sign of suffering. Tea without milk and without sugar. And she cried because of the hunger. And I was just so upset about the situation that we were finding ourselves in. And that's at that point is when I realized something has to change, something has to shift, something other than what we are going through. Because if we said nothing, if we did nothing, then it would remain the same. But for some reason, I didn't think about reporting her to that. That was not my immediate solution for the situation I found. And now, in hindsight, I wonder, why did I just say it? But I decided to just take matters into my own hands. So, like I said, Dad had this ritual where, as he left, he would put the money in the envelope, and then he'd go in the morning. We wake up, and the money is there, and it was automatically my sister. But I wanted to have control over the money so that I can use it and make sure that it actually lasts through the period of time that my dad intended for it to last. And so I decided, this I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. I'm going to be the first one to get that money. And once it's in my hands, like, I'm the one in charge. Like, for that time, there was no deputy parent in my mind. It was just about making sure that we actually survive over the period of time that dad was away. And so I took control of the money. And I remember that morning when I had it in my hands, and I was actually shaking, and I was a bit anxious. There was some anxiety in my heart, because I was like, okay, so now you're in charge. Now what? So now I had to figure out, okay, so what are the things we often buy? What's not there in the house? What would we have to buy? How long would that last? How long is that away? How much money do I have? And so I had to do some tracking of the past that we had done in the past. I had to do some budgeting, and I just needed to make sure that if I divided this money across 3 days, it would be enough. And at that moment is when I realized there are some skills that I needed in order to manage this money. So I was basically having to teach myself how to manage money and how to control money at that age, because up until that point there was really no conversation about money. Like, dad would leave the money, but he knows he's done the math and it's going to be enough. But have we, I don't know, maybe he's had a conversation with my sister, but for me, I really had to learn on the job. And my sister made a comment or two about me having the money and being in charge of the money, but beyond that, she didn't do much, because I think at the back of her mind, she was like, yeah, she knew she was doing something wrong. And so there was a reason why there was a reason why that I took charge. So really, there was no pushback from her. And so I had to learn how to start budgeting, and how to track expenses, and how to keep a budget, and all those things that are skills that up until today I feel like are really necessary for every single person, including children. Because immediately after that, the money was sufficient. Like, I realized we did have enough. Like, there was no need for us to go hungry a day or two before that comes home. There was actually sufficient money to run through, as long as it was well managed. And so the problem wasn't that it wasn't enough. The problem was that it was actually being mismanaged. And so that's when I started learning the importance of financial education and financial literacy and money skills as a whole, as a life skill. Because at that point, it was actually life or death. Because you could starve to death. I mean, unless we go out and ask our neighbor for food. But at that point, it really felt like it was a dire situation, maybe because of age, maybe because of circumstance, or I don't know. But it did feel like it was a dire situation. And I and I realized how important that skill is. And from then on, I just I got an interest in money. I got an interest in finance, and I pursued that as a professional career. So even when I went into high school, I just looked for subjects that were leaning more towards money and money management, accounting and business and all those things. And I went into campus. deciding to pursue finance, and out of campus pursuing wherever the money led me, I went. And ultimately, to get me to this point where I started my consulting and my business, which is around financial education and financial literacy, and giving people the life skills that I think they need to elevate the kind of life that they were living from. A life that could actually be heightened and elevated if they had the right information and the right skills. That's, in hindsight, is a big part of the story behind my business, Pesa Savvy Limited, which I started. I've been doing this for 5 years. But when I think about the origin story of my business, I cannot not talk about that story, because it was the first time that I really started looking at money differently and realizing there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Pesa Savvy. Are you ready to take control of your finances? Unlock the secrets to financial success with the Pesa Savvy downloadable ebook, Mastering Your Money, the ultimate guide to financial wellness. In this comprehensive guide, you will explore the profound impact of your financial history on your money behavior. Learn why setting value-based financial goals is the key to unlocking your financial potential and achieving the life you desire. Discover the proven strategies for setting effective financial goals that drive lasting change. Don't let the financial stress hold you back anymore. Check out our show notes and download Mastering Your Money now and take control of your financial health. Available exclusively for our podcast listeners. Wow, Auma, that is, you literally took me to my childhood and my sisters. I'm a middle child.
Yeah.
And, I have a younger sister and an older sister. So I literally understand, that context of something has been left and you have to manage it and you're just a child. It suddenly hits you. But how do you feel after sharing that story?
I don't know. I remember, because it's not the first time I've shared it, but for some reason, the first time I shared it and I shared it with my brother, is like, how did I not know this was happening? Because, but it's such a significant part of my money story and my relationship with money. It's such a significant story for me that it has never left my mind. And whenever I think about that story, I remember waking up that morning. I woke up at 6 a.m. just to pull the money from the top of the fridge.
Yeah.
That image is etched into my mind. I don't think I can ever forget it. But it's good to share it with people, because I think there are some great lessons, just not just for me, but even for my sister and my brother. Yeah.
So what happened with your sister? Did she hold a grudge? Did you guys fight? Was it like World War II? I remember when I was fighting with my siblings, it felt like, the end of the world, like Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers or whatever. It felt like it was serious. But then my parents used to look at it like it was such a small thing.
Yeah.
But for us, it was like, this is how,
I know.
you're the enemy.
Siblings
I will end
fight.
you.
And there were
How
such
was it
emotive fights. To be honest, I feel like this particular story, I can't remember if we ended up fighting, but in the entire history with my sister, we have fought a lot. So this was probably one of the things we did fight about. Though I feel like she took a backseat to it because she knew she was doing something wrong. So she didn't push back as much as she would have, especially because I was not telling my dad. I was just taking control. And this story didn't need to go beyond us, Yeah. And my dad passed away without never hearing about it. Yeah. Never knowing that this is what happened and who is actually in charge when he leaves. He never found out.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So she was just like, I've done my enjoyment.
Yes.
So as long as you don't tell,
Yeah.
I'm okay.
But now she had to look for other ways to get this money that she was going out with. Yeah.
But you know what? Your story really reminds me about the power of financial literacy for families. And, as a money expert, what do you think is the right age to start introducing conversations to children? Whether you're a guardian, whether you're a mentor, whether you're a parent, what do you think is the right age to start introducing conversations about money?
That's a great question. And it's a question I've been getting a lot the past 2 weeks. I think from the moment that they start asking for stuff. And whatever they're asking for needs you to get into your wallet, that's the time to start having money conversations, because the if you don't have it, your immediate response is hakuna pesa, or there's no money. I don't have it right now. And that is very strong messaging if it is not followed up by then what, then when, if not now, then when. Because what we do is just, or rather historically, or even when I talk with my clients, it usually ends at their dad has said there's no money and that's it. But we miss an opportunity, a learning opportunity. Because if we take that conversation just a bit deeper, then you can say, okay, there's no money right now, but maybe if we put, 5 shilling every day for the next week, for the next 2 weeks, then we'll be able to buy it. Then they start understanding the power of delayed gratification, or the idea of saving, of putting aside money in order to get what you want. But just that there's no money is a problematic response. Recently, I attended a conference, FinCon, and I realized that there's some variation of there's no money in different parts of the world. So I was talking to this particular lady in the US, and she was saying, amongst the African Americans, a common phrase that mothers always threw around. For example, if you go and ask, can we have McDonald's today? And then mothers always say, it's like we all grow up in the same house. Like, they always said, we don't have McDonald's money, or do you have McDonald's money? Because there's money, and then there's McDonald's money, because that seemed like another kind of money, for special things. And that was the answer they got, and that's where it ended. And so if you don't take that conversation a bit deeper into being able to explain that they are luxury, there are things called needs, there are things called wants, and when money comes, we put it in certain priority, then you've lost an opportunity to actually teach about money.
I think that's very important, because when I think about even my own childhood, I remember that my parents went through certain situations financially where we weren't necessarily informed what exactly is happening. And I remember, like those days for supermarket, you go and you ask your mom for something. I tell you, one time my mom embarrassed me. And that day I was like, I swore I would never ever ask her for anything in public. At the supermarket, and you know how they put those things, the sweets, the chocolates, the whatever, those quick ones for picking. And then I remember asking her, hey, mom, can I have a sweet? And I was the sweetest child. I was so sweet about it. I was at those screaming, little, what are they called? What cocoa felons? Apparently, I'm hearing that these kids are called cocoa felons
I saw
nowadays.
that.
Imagine, I was the sweetest kid, and then my mom just shouted at me, and my mom is normally so sweet, so I'm like, hey, you're not pulling out your claws in public. Then she was like, "Siko na pesa, I don't have money. Where do you want me to remove the money from?" I tell you, I was so embarrassed. And so I remember what that made me think. It's fear asking for money. In public, or even my own parent, I was like, I won't ask for money. Which now you can understand the deep amount of shame I felt asking my mom for cash, for my pad. So I just remember that there wasn't, you'd be told something but no explanation given to it. You're told there's no money, but you're not told why isn't there enough money? Why? What does it look like? Are we saving? Are we investing? And I remember I was part of the first cohort of the Jumbo Junior account people. So we were given those tiny little tembos, those little elephant piggy banks. And I remember I was just putting money away, but I was like, but why am I putting money? It's like we are given these things. We were given these things, but there was no education that facilitated it. We were given the bank accounts, we were given the this, but there was no education that followed and tying it to our futures.
Exactly.
For example, if somebody told me, oh, at that time I wanted to become an air hostess or what, And then everyone else who read Ben Carson's book wanted to become
A
a
doctor.
neurosurgeon. So even me, I wanted to become a neurosurgeon before I realized I don't
Yeah.
like blood.
Yeah.
So I was like, eh? But if at that time you'd have told me, if you want to become a neurosurgeon,
Yeah.
do you know how much it costs to become a neurosurgeon?
Yeah.
Or do you want to buy a stethoscope,
Yeah.
or something? So that is something that can fund my dream. But if financial literacy was introduced to me in alignment with my interests,
Yeah.
I think I would have been so hungry to learn more. And especially in my culture, the reason why your story is really important is because in my culture, the Abaluya culture, and specifically my family, it's heavily patriarchal. So unfortunately, whether you are an educated woman or girl or not, somehow you're prepared for life in that you're not prepared for money. You're not even prepared for what happens after you get the job.
Yeah.
You're prepared for a husband. You're prepared for, if you've studied well, you're going to marry up. You're going to marry a rich husband who'll take care of your needs. But I remember those conversations, we just never had them in a household full of girls. And we studied higher learning, but we've never had conversations about money
Yeah.
in our family. So I can only imagine what that looks like, because if we are not having these conversations at a young age, no wonder the literacy levels, financial literacy levels as a nation is
They're
really
quite
low.
low. Yeah, they're quite low. And as a child, when you keep hearing that same statement of there's no money, you start to develop coping mechanism, because ultimately we have some human nature in us. They're like, I have to get this money somehow. So you start finding even children, because when I work with my clients, I hear some of these stories. Like, so some of them start saying, okay, so if I ask for this thing, I won't be given. Right? So let me tie it together with this other thing. I know if it is a school related thing, they will give me money, So you become so manipulative and conniving just so that you can get what this thing is, because there hasn't been time to actually sit down with you and tell you what money is about. It always seems like it's for grown-ups and it's for those people. But those messages, actually, when we grow up, they become our truth, our belief system about what money is, and it influences the behaviors that we have around money.
You've raised something very important. What if our parents honestly didn't know how to do that because they never had those conversations with their own parents?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, especially as a finance expert, who's not only gone through this in your own household, but also with what you're noticing about the national psyche of Kenyans with regards to money. I mean, colonialism just happened the other day. Our country is about to turn 60 years this year. And I'm just thinking, my parents, they saw colonialists with their eyes. I was telling my mom that the other day, you people saw colonialists with their two eyes, and like my two grandfathers were actually kidnapped.
Wow.
As during World War II, they were war veterans. They were taken to Burma to fight, and then they were just dumped back into the country to survive. With all of those psychological issues, imagine. And then you're just made to survive, and then so much was taken away from them. So how do you think such a national psyche that affected our country, things like colonialism, and then our parents, money in their hands, but how they ended up looking at money, and then people like us now, their children, them not necessarily, not all of them, but some, maybe not being able to hand down information or even know enough about money, enough to teach about money.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I'm about to say a controversial thing.
Controversy.
Well, whenever I talk about financial history and financial messaging that we got growing up, I always speak from a point of none of this was being done to hurt you intentionally. It's just what it is. It's the situation you found yourself, and that's how you grew up. So, but it doesn't mean that now that you're aware, there must be better. We must do better. We must know better. So, from that point of our parents did not have the skills, and therefore did not know how to communicate. That was the past. We ride on the shoulders of, the giants of the past. So what they did not know, now we know, we push it to the next level.
Yeah.
Our children should not bear the mistakes of now of our great grandparents now from that level. Get that awareness and make sure that we are not passing it on to our children.
Yeah.
But from a national point of view, even from an African point of view, and colonialism and all those things, I feel like we have a common experience of poverty. We have a common experience of lack as a country and as a continent. And so because of that common experience, we have normalized what should not be normalized, which is the lack, the poverty, and the not having, the strife, the struggle, such that the idea that there is more for you is not something that a lot of people have grasped, mentally speaking. And especially when you kept hearing, there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. Now, from a leadership point of view, I do feel like part of our corruption problem is tied to the fact that a lot of our leaders they have not dealt with their poverty trauma.
Yeah.
And so they come into leadership.
Poverty trauma leaders. The next time you vote for a leader,
Let me
ask yourself,
tell you.
take me through your childhood. Do you have poverty trauma?
You have grown up with nothing. In fact, your entire life, you've not even handled 100,000 shillings.
Yeah.
And then you come and you're put in charge of an entire county, an entire ward, an entire budget. What makes us think that these guys are not going to take this money and use them for their own needs? Because they don't know any better.
So
like
much
this
sense.
is, now we have access. We have access to all this money. And no one told us to talk about money, or no one showed us that you're supposed to budget and you're supposed to do this. And I do understand that. I think before they take office, there's some training they went through. But training takes, because we are dealing with much more than lack of information. We are dealing with behavior and mindset. And that's really difficult to unpack, right? As a leader, if you haven't dealt with those things, you cannot be responsible for public coffers and you're not of your own.
Oh my gosh.
You know? And I feel like when we are dealing with the issue of corruption, our people, they both need therapy and they also need financial education.
Deliverance. They need deliverance. And it makes so much sense, because if somebody, and Kenyans, to be honest, when it comes to election season, Kenyans do love a good rags to riches story. I had nothing, but here I am. I had no shoes, but here I have shoes. Or I used to walk barefoot to school. How many kilometers? And here I am driving a Land Cruiser or a Prado.
We need to start questioning how these Prados came.
And then we almost feel happy for the guy who had nothing to have something without knowing it's at our cost. It's our money.
We are the losers.
We are the losers. And so it makes so much sense, because if it's coming from that mindset of limitation, then somebody does not understand the power of generosity and are coming together, collaboration, because the wealthy nations in the world know that it's shared. Wealth is shared. That if the person near me is also doing well and I'm doing well, then we both grow up and do well. But I can only imagine a leader who's grown up around not having any or believing that there is so little for them. And then they're given so much access, national access to money. They're not going to think about even their own children or their children's children or even the rest of the country. They're going to think about themselves. And they're like, I'm here. Let me get whatever I can. Let me build my apartments. And let me fly and do whatever. Fly around the world.
All those things I never had.
This chance will not come again.
Exactly.
So let me make do with what I have and I bounce. And the rest of you, whoever is next, can maybe be the one to support you. And I've noticed there's also a kind of ignorance around and maybe a dissatisfaction with technocrats. You know how people don't like technocrats? Because they're like, oh, rich people, elite people, they had, so they're coming and telling us what, they don't understand us. So the people with the education and with the management, we look away from them because we believe they will take from us, or it might even be some form of jealousy. That's how I see it.
Better than.
Because like, how can you have better than me? Then I vote for you so that you can even have more. So they would rather vote for one of their own who has had none to have, because they even believe even if they steal, at least they'll steal for us. So,
our problems are deep.
Oh my gosh. I think then just the way I said, like with girls starting, as soon as a girl starts her period, it should also, not even as soon as she starts her period. When I said that when a girl is being taught about puberty and preparation for her sexual reproductive health, she should also be taught about financial literacy. I also feel like it's a national conversation, but first starts with families.
It
Because I
does.
think nations heal. The unit of a nation is a
Is the
family.
family.
And so if
Absolutely.
our Kenyan families or African families are not having conversations about money,
Mm-hmm.
then we are not ready to have national conversations about money.
Not at all. Like you've just said it perfectly, because our national money problems are as a result of even money itself becoming a taboo topic. And so fathers who are not used to being questioned in their own homes, all of a sudden people are asking, what did you take this money? What did you do with this money? And so they rebel, they revolt, or they keep secrets, and now the entire nation is suffering because somebody is not willing to be kept accountable. Because in their family, in their home, they are the head. No one keeps them accountable. And it's really pouring out from the head to the base, and the people who are suffering are the people at the bottom. And what we are saying is that the money conversation should start at the bottom so that we are healed from the bottom up.
Bottom up, right?
Yeah.
Bottom up. Are we getting
Please do
political
not,
here?
we are not aligned.
Yeah, bottom up, but from when we heal our family money stories, then we can get to heal our national money stories and
Absolutely.
situations.
Wow, this Nini has taken a tangent.
But we are having it now. If
Yeah.
you've never talked about money in your family, please let us know. Do you guys talk about money in your family? Or is money a taboo topic in your family? Please share with us some of the issues that maybe you've grown up around, be it your childhood or even in your teenagehood as you're growing up. How many of you are having money conversations as we speak in your households? And how many of you just didn't have any? Please share with us so that we can start these conversations, because as we've heard, it starts from a family level and it ends up affecting us at a national level and continental level. And for Africa to be wealthy, we need to start talking about money.
Absolutely. All of us. All of us. So, in my story, I mentioned at that point at which I realized that there are some skills I was missing. When you have large amounts of money in your hand that you have never held before, there's a feeling that it creates. Sometimes it's a capacity thing. Like you just feel like, "Ooh, I don't have the capacity to manage this large amount of money." And what I was learning qua ground is that I needed some certain skills. I didn't do, I think, what I know now, but I managed with what I had. The information that I had is what I just basically started to deal with. One of the things I needed to do was to know, how much money do we actually spend in a day. What are the things that we buy on a day-to-day basis, and what are those things that are likely to run out within this period of time that dad was away? And this introduces one of the tools that I think is necessary but tedious. People don't like it, but we must track our expenses. We really need to know, what does it cost to live the life that I'm living? Because that's the question I needed to answer. How much do we actually spend within this period of time that dad is away? So you as an individual must know, part of you being able to manage your money is knowing what it costs to live the life that you're living. If you're not conscious of that, then it's possible you are overspending, and it's also possible that you are necessarily denying yourself things that you need. And so one of the tools that we will offer as Hamani Story Africa, because we are cool like that, is a tracking. We are going to offer a tracking tool, an expense tracking tool as a PDF, but we're also going to attach some tracking apps. Two tracking apps that I trust and I often recommend to my clients as tools that you can use to track on a day-to-day basis where you're spending money on. Now, the reason why tracking is tedious is because people feel like, even, I went out today and I bought somebody a soda, for example. Do I also have to include that? I'm like, yes, please. Because what happens in the day that you don't have the money to buy so and so a soda? So ideally every single coin needs to be put into some sort of record. If you have to do this manually, then you do the paper and you do the apps, or you do Excel, whichever one you feel like works best for you. But it's necessary for you to have some sort of idea. We track for two reasons. One is to be able to know what it costs to live the life you're living. Once you figure that out and you have the numbers, if you have 1 to 3 months of tracking, you can use that data to now write a budget. We don't write a budget at the top of our head based on what you think our life should cost. It should actually be based on data. And the data that we have is what we are collecting by tracking. And when you write a budget based on actual data, the chances are that you will stick to it are very high. Number two reason why we track is so that we keep ourselves accountable to the budget that we have created. So if I said, oh, it should cost me about 5K for groceries for the month, it's possible that in a particular month you actually go beyond 5K. Will you know or will you not know? So that's why we track. We track for these two reasons. There are some people who find it extremely tedious to do the tracking, and based on where you spend the most, if you spend and buy stuff with hard cash, hard money, then it's really necessary for you to write it down somewhere. But if you use M-Pesa, for example, or you make card payments, then these are platforms that can pull out reports for you. And at the end of the week or at the end of the month, you can go and do the tracking all at once. It's just that sometimes if you do a lot of transactions, it can be a very difficult process. But depending on let me say, your personality in terms of dealing with money. There are people who are so anal. So on a day-to-day basis, they just want to track and they love it. They actually thrive in that. And then there are people who just find it tedious. M-Pesa has a way in which you can track every time M-Pesa app, let me say the M-Pesa app has a way in which you can track every time you make a payment. You can choose the category that you want to label it as. And then at the end of the month, you can pull it out and be able to know this is where all the money went. The M-Pesa app doesn't have all the best categories, but it's really a step up towards not doing it at all. And then if you do a lot of card payments, credit card or ATM, then you can pull your bank statements and pull your card statements and you can do the tracking. Then after that, now you start to budget. Now, the way I budget with my clients is that we do a full year budget. We do 12 months of budgeting. And because I feel like when people think one month on month, we can be very short-sighted. But when you can think into the entire year and in November, it's so-and-so's birthday. And usually, from history, this is what happens on that birthday. And yet it's coming, but you don't do anything to prepare for it. So when November comes, all of a sudden, your budget is in shock because you have this trip that costs 20,000 shillings and it wasn't anywhere in the plan that you created. But when we pull a 12-month plan, you can know the instances where the budget is going to shoot in terms of expenses, where the income might shoot in terms of how much is coming in, and really gives you a full view of your money. It's especially important for business owners and people with irregular income to do full year budgets, because it really helps you to know whether you're actually living within your means or not. And then you can have 4 main categories in your budget, which is the income category, how much money came in, the financial goals category, what are you working towards, especially long-term investments and long-term plans, and then the sinking fund category, which are expenses that you expect to have within the year and you want to plan for them, health insurance, auto insurance, December celebrations, those kind of things are good to put in a sinking fund. And then you have the day-to-day expenses. So the second tool we're going to offer our podcast listeners is a budgeting tracker, a very simplified one, but it's a full year budgeting tracker that you can then use to help you plan your finances.
Did you love today's episode? Share it with a friend and stay tuned for more stories. Subscribe now to our podcast and follow us on our socials on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Her Money Story Africa.